Welcome to the Phoenix podcast hosted by Marta Miner with guests who have walked through fire and emerged stronger than ever. Let their stories light up your way. Welcome to the Phoenix podcast. In today's podcast, you're going to hear the rest of the story. And our guest, Richie Acosta, is going to continue with his powerful message and powerful story of his life. So this is part 2. There is nothing worse than as a teenager being left and your parents are gone all of a sudden, parents that you loved so much. And now you're left with not only that feeling, like you said, like my mom left me, which at that age, you don't understand that we all make decisions that are not perfect, but I think her intention was to save everybody and not to abandon anybody. But as a little kid,
Right.
you take it so personally. You're not a little kid anymore at that age, but you took it personally. Like she did it against me, like I was not that important. And that is the story. Once again, we carry our stories from our childhood into adulthood, where you feel maybe, I don't know what feelings you felt, unworthy or not good enough, or what is
Yeah.
it that makes you
Yeah.
feel at that moment?
Yeah. At that moment, I felt unworthy. That's what I felt, not enough. And I carried that feeling into intimate relationships. So it
Hmm.
was on my first real relationship. It was something that, like, if I felt unworthy, if I felt not enough, if I wasn't giving love to myself, how could I possibly give love to somebody else?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
And then if
something
your
that,
mother leaves, then how can a woman not leave me? Right.
right,
And of course,
right.
mother she should always be by you. So if she chooses that,
Yeah.
then why would
Yeah.
anybody want to be with me?
Exactly. That was
Mhm.
something in an intimate relationship that, like, all I would do was push to be like, okay, when are you leaving? Because I know you're gonna leave. So I would test and push to see when you would leave. So then I could tell my story, like, oh, there you are. You're right. You're by yourself, Richie. You have nobody. She left you, right? That was the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And from a grown-up perspective, we all know that those are lies that you tell yourself.
Right.
But growing up as a child, like we believe in what our brains at that time, the way they're formed, make a decision that this is my life and this is what's happening. And then we just run with it. And it's just so tragic because unless you get therapy, you would be running with
Yeah.
that story forever. I was
Forever.
abandoned
Yeah.
by my mom
Yeah.
and my
Yeah.
dad
That would
made
be something that
choices.
would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's all. That story is so powerful. But then I can only imagine your life unfolding. So now you're a teenager and you have a sister and you guys have to figure out your life on your own. So what
Yeah.
happens next after you? I don't know if you're processing grief first or you have to continue living your life and who's
I,
supporting you? What happens?
yeah. Those first couple of days, like, there was chaos in my house. We were People were coming in and out, family members, right? That was, like, I want to say, for a week tops, and then everybody goes back to the regular life continues, right? And
Yeah.
then we're me and my sister, they're looking at each other like by ourselves, like, now what? And I remember during that chaos, I remember me going into my bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror, and telling myself, Richie, like, this shit isn't gonna define you. You're gonna rise above this experience. I tapped in from that toolbox of martial arts. I told myself, you're going to do whatever it takes. Like, whatever it takes, you're going to make sure that mom and dad didn't die in vain, that the bad choices dad made were not for nothing. You're going to continue their legacy, their love. You're going to stand
Mm.
up on your own 2 feet, take care of yourself, take care of your sister. And that was the commitment that I made to myself at 19 years old. And I pushed the pain really down deep inside of me. And at I would say, the first decade of my life, during my whole 20s, I used anger and pain. That was my real
Driver.
motivator and
Hmm.
driver, right? And that served me during that time, right? It served me for a point. And I used that to throw myself at work. And I remember
Hmm.
the first person, which was, I called him Uncle Theo. It was somebody that I saw around our circle. We would vacation together, and this was the first person that approached me and played that fatherly role, let's say, or that mentor. Hey, let me help you. Let's do this. And I remember buying a piece of real estate with him, and I had some other property for my parents, and we had sold the property. I had $500,000. I put the $500,000 into this project with him. We were building a luxury home at the time, and there was no contract. I didn't know anything, right? Like, I'm literally a
Hmm.
kid that had never worked a day in his life, and I have this man saying, "Oh yeah, let's buy the
Guiding
slot.
you.
Don't
Hmm.
worry," guiding me. Hey, let's buy the slot. I'm gonna build a house. I'm gonna take out the construction loan. Don't worry, we'll split the profit 50-50 once it's done. And during this time, the little money that had been left over
Yeah, because let's
from my
kind of
parents,
tell everybody that the money, all these hundreds of millions of dollars we knew about, they're all gone. You're left with a little bit of money to be able to get on your feet, but we
right?
don't have all this wealth we were talking about
No,
to help you and
it's
your
gone,
sister.
right?
Yeah.
All that wealth was gone with my mother and father, right? So it happens to be that this man, that is a guy that I call uncle, he worked with my father, and he was part of my father's organization, and it happens to be that he knew where all of my father's money was, because his brother-in-law was a contractor, and he would build all these safe houses for my father. So
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is the house where there's a safe in there, whatever, we got to break down the walls or safe. And he held that safe for us that first year as we're building a house together, me and him, and real estate. And I remember one day my sister had this dream with my dad, and she said, "We need to get control of our money, go see this man and get our money back." And he's like, "Well, your father owed me this, and he had this
Mm-hmm.
debt, and blah, blah." And it was a story, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. And
Mm-hmm.
what ended up being a couple $1 million that we had, it was like, here's $1 million. And that's it. You go and figure out your life. And the lot that we were building together that I had it was bought with my $500,000, or mine and my sister's, and he took out the loan. I was supposed to make, you know, I don't know, 750, 800 on top of that. I lost that because he kept it. He kept it all. No
Wow.
remorse, just move forward. And that was my first experience of boom, getting punched in the mouth and being a little fish, and being chewed up and eaten. But I did learn a lot with him during that year
Mm-hmm.
on how to build a house, on how to get subcontractors. I learned a lot. And that kind of fueled me into, okay, I started buying fix and flips. We did another project. I invested into a shopping center, and I just started buying and selling real estate. And in '03, my best friend from high school comes down from college, and we meet at a Hillstone, which is a restaurant. And at that time I was living in Pompano Beach, and he's like, "Hey, my father is doing a condo conversion development, which that is, you buy apartment rentals and you can convert rentals into condominiums, and then you resell
Mm-hmm.
them." So he bought something in Central Florida. He's short $250,000 to go to the closing table. If he doesn't close tomorrow and bring the $250,000, he's gonna lose whatever he had put into the deal, $1 million, whatever it was. And this was a property that was quarter mile away from Disney World. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, whatever, let's do it. I went in because he was my friend, and I really had no idea what I was getting myself into. And within a 10-month period, I turned 250 into 550, 600, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I experienced that, I was like, oh, wow, we have a business here. Let
Mm-hmm.
me go mortgage all the real estate I have. Let me go
Yeah.
talk to every single person that I know from my childhood, friends, family, my girlfriend's
Mm-hmm.
family, my friends. And I went out and I started pitching everybody and saying, hey, here's a real estate deal. And I just started raising capital. And I look young today that I'm 42. Back then I was 22, 23, and I
Yeah.
look like my 14-year-old son today.
Yeah.
And it was crazy that to me that grown men were giving me 100,000, 250, $500,000,
Mm-hmm.
$2 million checks. And the developer didn't have a track record. He only had one project he had done. So it was a brand new developer. And I was a kid raising money pretty much. And I guess people bought into my confidence. People bought
Yeah.
into my authenticity, right? I had so much passion in what I was doing, and I believed so much into it that it wasn't like I was selling anybody. I was like, hey, I'm giving you an opportunity. Here's my investment. Look at what I did in a year. I'm bringing you in on this deal. I'm going to give you 50% of the profits
Mm-hmm.
without making money on your money. And I was telling people
Mm-hmm.
straightforward, but you're going to make 50% return in a year. If you're
Mm-hmm.
cool with that, then, and that's how I was making. And people were like, okay. And I was able to raise, I don't know, $5-6 million, give or take. I had five or so $1 million of my own money into these projects.
Mm-hmm.
And '03, '04, '05, '06, '07, those 5 years uh, were amazing, financially speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
still hadn't been dealing really with my parents' stuff and the trauma. I had been
Mm-hmm.
focusing so much on work that I was feeding that one part of me.
Yeah,
And
and I want
I
to
was,
comment on that because when you first told me that story, that just seemed to me like, wow, how does a 20-some-year-old raise capital? Because I'm in real estate myself too, and we have still a lot of blocks. There's a lot of things that a lot of people feel that you didn't probably feel. And I was like, how is he doing this? And I think what I came up with, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like number one, the very strong survival instinct is like, I will be successful no matter what because I have no option. I don't have a fallback on my mom or dad or anybody else. So that is a driver that will get you to success no matter what, which is similar to what your dad had probably. And secondary, what fears can somebody have when they've already lost both of their parents? Like the fear is so little of asking to raise money or whatever compared to what fears you could have had. Once you lose the
Yeah.
most important thing, like who cares anymore? That's what really stood out to me. I'm like, it's not that hard to ask somebody for money. Look what I've dealt with already, right?
Yeah. You hit it spot on. That's exactly what it was. Like I literally, like the worst thing that could have possibly happened to me already happened. So what's the
Yeah,
worst that could happen? Somebody tells me no. Okay, whatever. I continue on to
who
the next
cares?
person. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, you give me money, you introduce me to somebody else that's going to give me money. They tell me no, I move on to the next. And I was just on a mission to raise as much capital as I could because I knew that the more capital I brought into the project, the more that I was going to be able to earn. And in my mind, I adopted like at that 19-year-old self. When I heard that story of my dad making $100 million, like in subconsciously in my mind, which I didn't realize this till like in my 30s, I made up a belief and I put a number to that belief. Like I made up a
Mm-hmm.
belief that if I didn't make $100 million, then my parents would die in vain. Like everything, the choices, everything my dad made, like it was worthless, right? Like they were worthless. So that was really like my fuel, that coupled with the
Yeah.
anger, with the survival, like I have to, I made a commitment and I have to survive. All that was driving me. And then
Mm-hmm.
during that time, for outside people, they were looking at me and they're like, "Oh my God, Richie has it all. He's young. He's driving on M6. He has the beautiful $1 million townhome. He lives in Coconut Grove. He has all this money. He goes and spends $100,000 on vacations, whatever it was." But the truth was that I was hurting. I was in pain. I was unfulfilled. I had a beat up stick that I was just whipping myself. Think of a racehorse when you're just
Yeah.
going and the jockey just hitting that was me. I never celebrated myself. I never said pat
Mm-hmm.
myself on the back and be like, "Richie, damn, congratulations, man, you just raised $1 million." Nah, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
to me it was like expected. Come on,
Mm-hmm.
you raised a million,
Mm-hmm.
go get two. Oh, you got two,
Mm-hmm.
go get four. So that was my
Well,
attitude that
if you are striving for 100 million, no matter what you do, you're never going to measure up unless you reach that. And that's a
right.
number that unless you do something illegal, it's really difficult to just pull out of thin air. It does, even in real estate. It's
Yeah,
not
no,
that
no,
easy to get to 100 million really quickly. And if that's your measurement stick is I'm a nobody, I'm worthless, and my parents died in vain unless I get there, you are going to beat yourself up. And it's
yeah,
so
yeah.
unfair because you were doing really well, but you were feeling still inadequate and not good enough, I'm assuming.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly how I was feeling. And that was most of my 20s. And
And
then
the story is that you were not able to maintain that wealth. What
right,
happened again?
right, yeah. Yeah. So then, like everybody knows, 2008 happened, right? 2008
Mm-hmm.
financial crisis. And I remember 2008 financial crisis watching Bloomberg on TV, and they were like, Lehman Brothers just went under. And I was like, "Oh, what is going on? What's happening in this world?" And within a week, I remember news coming out saying, "Oh, Florida, the entire state, there's no more financing for condominiums."
Wow.
I was like, "What?" And at that time, when that news broke, we had roughly about 3,000 condominium units for sale in Central Florida that we were converting apartments
Mm.
into condos. And so that's just to put a number. That is investment wise, roughly about 250 million. When it was to
Wow.
sell out, it was like a 550, 600 million sellout. So
Wow.
that's what we had at the time. Our group was the largest developer in Central Florida at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my buddy's dad, Carlos, he was like looking at me like, "Shit's bad. I'm not sure how we're gonna get out of this." And during that year, 2008, 2009, must have sold, I don't know, 700 to 900 condominium units that I sold, like wholesaling, moving, trying
Mm-hmm.
to move as much as we can to try to recoup money and things like that. But even doing that, it was like the debts were so much with the bank that he was like, "Look, I
Yeah.
can't sustain the debts. I can't sustain the payments. We're going under." I remember him
Mm-hmm.
having that conversation with me, telling me like, "We're going under." And I was like, "What am I going to do with the people?" My wife at the time, it was like her grandfather, her mother, her father,
Yeah.
the cousin, my
Mm.
cousins, like friends. What was I going to do? And luckily, there were still other buildings from years prior that were still paying out because the debts had already been paid off in those buildings. And I must have collected between '08 to maybe 2010, roughly about 2.5 million or a little more than that. And all that money that I collected, I paid to all the
Yes.
investors. Yeah. So me and my sister stayed with zero, but I felt that was the honorable thing to do and the right thing to do. That's what I felt in my heart, and that's what I did. I ended up losing
Mhm.
my house that I had in the Grove. I had to sell my cars, sell jewelry, whatever. I ended up living in Orlando for some time in one of the condos. I lived there for a year for free, and yeah,
Yeah.
by 2011, I had to begin filing for bankruptcy.
And that's not the end of the story, because obviously I think that resilience and the coaching that your dad did when you were a young boy of never giving up and pursuing a sport that you like it did not, some people committed suicide during that time, and there
Yeah.
were a lot of people that could not handle that financial loss, and you were definitely the one that made it up again, which is shocking. Like when I listen to your story, to me, what comes to me is like, number one time in a lifetime, somebody can accumulate wealth and be so successful. But for you, every time you fall, you make it up again in a different way. And each time it's something different. It's a little bit different business model, but you always rise on top. And we won't be able to talk about every single story. I just want you to bring up maybe one more story from New York, when you went to New York. And
Yeah.
that was completely different business, which I'm like, this is part of this great movie that keeps going, right? What did you do in New York before?
Yeah. So in 2010, my son was born, and at that time, I was living in my mother-in-law's house. I didn't have any money. I was unemployed. In my shit, playing that
Mm-hmm.
violin, that victim violin that we
Mm-hmm.
all play sometimes. I was playing that music in my head, and I remember 3 months old or so, I looking at my baby boy, and I look at him in the eyes, and my wife at the time was going to school. She was working for her father's printing shop. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life, Richie? I just asked
Mm-hmm.
myself, like, I am responsible for this life in front of me. What am I doing right now? Come
Mm-hmm.
on. It's enough. It's time to stand up and go out again. You got to provide for your family. So I asked myself a question. I go, if mom and dad were here, what would I have done? What would my life have looked like?
Mm-hmm.
That I would have gone to school. Like most of all my friends,
Mm-hmm.
actually, not most, all my friends went to school. Okay, my plan was to go to New York. Okay, I was like, what do I like? And I'm like, I like finance. It's the time that I saw that the movie Wall Street was the Michael Douglas in the '80s. I was like, that looks like such a cool job. I want to be that guy one day. I remember watching that movie with my dad as a little kid, and I'm like, whatever that guy does, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it looks super cool and fun. So I'm like, I'm gonna apply to NYU. I did the essay application, submitted all the documents, everything I needed. I applied, and I remember asking my wife at the time, "Hey, if I make it, if I get in, are you gonna pack your stuff and leave with me to New York?" And she's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." So a couple months down the road, I get my acceptance letter, and hey, you've been accepted to New York University. So now it becomes real. I had no money, zero. My father-in-law at the time wrote us a check for $5,000, and a cousin of mine gave me a check for 5,000. So now I have $10,000. I moved to New York City with a 10-month-old baby boy. My wife was working remotely for her father, business doing like accounting, bookkeeping. And I got a job day one. It was a family member here of mine here in Miami that he had just opened with another attorney in New York. They were at the time doing, it was very popular for law firms to do like foreclosure defense, loan modification programs for people to try to
Mhm.
save their homes. And they would bring people in and to their law firms, and I would have to sit with them and sell them on the program. And if they would then opt into the program, that's when then the attorney would take over. But the beginning consultation was like with me, and I would have to sell them on the program, and then I would get a commission. So it was a commission only
Mhm.
job. And they would pack my schedule. I would work from 6 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. I was probably closing money wise on a monthly basis. I was making on a bad month $8,000. On my very best month, maybe $20,000. So I was doing pretty good
Mhm.
selling a commission only job. And then I was going to school from six Monday through Thursday. I would go to school from 6 to 9 o'clock at night, and I did that for 3.5 years and
Mhm.
graduated NYU, top of my class with a degree in economics. Year two that I was in New York, I landed myself a job in Wall Street in one of the largest broker shops. And I remember
Mhm.
the first meeting that I had with my boss at the time, Jewish guy named Mark. He was like, "Hey," I met him at a bar. We were having a drink, and "Hey kid, I like your energy, man. You have great energy. You look hungry. You got the job." I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay, awesome." I'm like, "What's the pay?" He's $40,000 a year. I was like, "Huh, okay, yes, I'm in." And I didn't understand that it was like a salary of 40,000, and then you had bonuses and commission. So like my first year, I made I don't know 120, $130,000, something like that. because I was able to participate in commissions. And then the rest is history, right? I went 8 years or 10 years, something like that, in Wall Street. I worked at Cantor the last 6 or 5 years. Since 2015, I worked in Cantor. And then I ended up quitting in right around COVID, or right after COVID, like early 2020, 2021. And I went into a startup. And in that startup, in a very short period, I made millions of dollars again. And I put all my money, risked it, right? Because subconsciously, that belief of I needed 100 million, that was still something that was driving me, and I hadn't really brought that to my awareness and unpacked that. Even though I had already been doing a decade plus of therapy and personal development work, and it was still something that I hadn't really brought to my awareness. And I risked money, and last year in 2023, I ended up losing a little over $4 million, which was everything that I had made during this time, during these last couple of years. And it was a tough year for me, 23.
All of those, it's just really shocking for me to hear all of this, because I think your subconscious is running the show, right? All of our subconscious is running the show. And no matter how much money you make, and you and I talked about it last time when we had a conversation, I'm like, this is not about the money. The money will keep coming and going until you fix that part, which says the 100 million is not the goal. The legacy that you leave for your family, for your mom and dad, is what I think you now finally realized last year. And you're like, let's switch it around. Because if I'm just chasing money for the sake of money, obviously it's the life, your soul is showing me this is not the path. This is not the path. You will make it and you lose it because something in you is saying it's not good enough. It's not 100 million, number one. Number two, that's not what your soul is on this earth for. Your parents, like when I think about your parents, would they ever see like, oh, your legacy, Richie, needs to be to make as much money as your dad? I don't think so.
No,
I think that's not
no,
even close to what they're thinking. It's like
not even
how
close.
many time it took you to fall and lose it all again to realize this is not what I'm here for. So now you've had this transformation and you're starting to think, okay, this is not it's not about that. And we didn't have time to talk about relationships and how it affected them. And now you are
Right.
in a very happy relationship, married
Yes.
to somebody who you love, and you have a beautiful
Yes.
family.
Yes.
But we won't be able to go into depths on all of that. But I also want to pull very important lessons out of your life for everybody, which is your soul's true calling. What is it? What did you determine recently?
Yeah. I feel that I got introduced to Tony Robbins in my early 20s, like through the CDs.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first time I heard one of those CDs, I was like, this guy needs to be like this guy. Like the way that he's transformed pain into love and just helped so many people. It was amazing to see, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then life happens, and life took me a bunch of different ways, but my heart was calling for something like that. And then this year, after going to rock bottom again for the second time now, I found myself in a real estate office. Last year, out of necessity, I went and I got my license, and I sold 200,000 worth of commissions, give or take, in the 6 month period. And I quickly realized that number one, I don't enjoy doing that, and that's not what I want to do. But because I began to feed me first, and that started at the beginning of this year. And what do I mean by that was that I put a rule on myself after meeting this guy, David Meltzer, in Hollywood, Florida. I saw him and I saw what he was doing online. He was killing it, crushing it, doing everything that I wanted to do. And then I saw that he was taking time. I just spoken at some conference, and then he's taking time to meet in the lobby area and meet with people
Mm-hmm.
and pour into them. So I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
if this guy could do that, I could definitely do this. And that was the first moment that I saw my real estate office as an opportunity for me to begin to empower people. And
Mm-hmm.
I approached my broker and I'm like, hey, I shared my story with her, which she had no idea. Her mouth dropped and she's, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You've been through it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's good. Don't worry. I'm here on a mission, and mine is I want to empower all your agents. And she's, of course, whatever you want, you have. So I started doing the training for free. Eventually, she was like, as soon as she saw me do my first training, she's Rich, I can't have you do this hour training for free. Every time you do a training, I'm going to pay you $1,000 for the hour. And I'm like, you want to give me $1,000 to go and do a training? Sure, I'll do it one every week if you want. So I came up with what's called today, it's called the Champions Mindset. And I started
Mm-hmm.
developing it. It's really a training which I tell my story, but touching four main points, which is commitment, action, authenticity, and urgency. And then I tie it into the salespeople, and I do a little bit of sales towards the end of it. And that has really been the foundation that I started this year. And then from there, I
Mm-hmm.
developed some online courses that's going to be coming soon, online university. And I've just been getting more accounts. And I did a
Mm-hmm.
training for a car sales, and I'm doing one for a Heights Travel Club in Mexico coming soon. So this whole business developed all because in January, I decided to going back to what I was saying, feed me. And what that was, I put this rule after meeting this guy, David, that I said, Richie, I got to give 9 minimum every day, 9 minutes to myself. What does that mean? I got to feed 5 minutes my body. Could be walking, running, hit workout, whatever it is. 2 minutes, my mind, silencing it, meditation. 2 minutes prayer. And then after that, I feed my heart by making breakfast for my kids, taking them to school, spending some quality time with them. And what I started doing is that normally I wake up about 5. I from 5 to 6:30, I'm feeding me. And then once the house wakes up at 6:30, I'm ready to spend time with my kids and do that. And since I started
Mm-hmm.
doing that, just doors began to open because now I'm focusing on me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm feeding and I'm going back to my heart, feeding my mind, feeding my spirit. And since that has been what I've been doing, everything else has been falling into place without me even thinking about money. It's just
Yeah.
coming to me, which is insane to me that for such a long time I was like chasing money instead of being like, how can I just give? Right? Take the
Mm-hmm.
lesson from my mom and dad that they were the two biggest givers that I knew in my life, and they just gave freely. And like, how can I apply that to business and just give? And then I feel that if we focus on giving and pouring more to others, everything else falls into place.
100%. Like you're living on purpose right now. And
Yeah.
before you were living out of survival.
Yes.
And I think that's a major difference is when we're doing something because like we feel like we have to survive. We need to keep catch up. I have this goal of 100 million. Everything falls apart because that's not what we're here for on this earth. In my belief system is that we're here to fulfill the true soul's calling. And unless you pay attention, sit down and listen to yourself, you don't know what that is. You're just going by what you determined in your childhood as all the little decisions you were making as stuff was happening to you, you were going and being driven by that. And finally you woke up and you said, no, what is it that I want to do? What is my soul calling for? And your soul is like, love, create more love, give more, be a giver. And I think you can accumulate the same amount of money as your goal is actually through doing this, but it's sustainable because you feel
Yeah.
fulfilled in it versus
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
other way around. It was just chasing. It's chase and chasing. When you chase a cat, it will always run away from you. Grab it,
A
but
hundred per, a 100%, 100%. When I got very clear with myself, like at the beginning of this year, and I started the more 30 days, 60 days, 90 days of me just feeding me, right?
mm-hmm,
I remember I write down, and the first time I wrote my mission is my purpose, my calling, what's been tugging at my heart is to raise our collective vibration of this world and help people shift from fear to love. Like silence that enemy within our head and drop back to your heart. And I said, okay, so that's my calling. I'm just focusing on that, and then whatever else comes around that, however it looks like, I'm 100% open to it. Like
mm-hmm,
to me, it's irrelevant what it looks like. If it's a training, if it's speaking on a stage, if it's doing a
mm-hmm,
podcast with you, it's about reminding people that like, hey, through life we build all these blocks around our hearts, and the more that we could remove the blocks, the more that we could begin to access our heart, let the light, the love that comes from above, right? Like that source,
mm-hmm.
universe, God, what I call God. Like when you tap into that, everything is endless, and that's the place that I feel that I'm in right now, which is amazing.
I love that. I love that for you because I want a very happy ending for your life because you've been through so much already. And I think your parents are finally happy to see that
Yes.
finally he got it. How many times did it take for him to fall down straight on his face
Yeah.
to understand that this was not what we wanted for him and the legacy that you're going to leave behind for your children and how you're going to be a beacon of hope for so many people. And sometimes things happen to us in life that we're like, why me? Why is this happening? But sometimes those traumatic and bad things that happen in your life are going to help hundreds, thousands, millions of people turn their life around. And it's all worth it in the end. Not that it's worth it because obviously it's never
I
lose your
get, yeah,
parents for
of
that,
course.
but the
No,
meaning that comes from it.
I I get 100% what you're saying, and yes, it is all worth it because if I wouldn't have experienced or gone through the things that I've gone through, I wouldn't be here today, right? It's just the man that I am today, right now, having this conversation with you just wouldn't exist because my life would have been completely different. And 100%, I feel like it's a purpose, right? All
Mm.
this pain, all this tragedy is to be able to show others that no matter what you go through, no matter how painful the experience is, you can forgive, you can let go, you can tap into your heart, you can let love and create out of something so bad and devastating, love can flourish and can. So
100%.
that's where I feel like I've gotten to, and it's a beautiful thing to for me witnessing myself because
Mm.
that little angry boy that wanted to light the world on fire, I really had to like let that boy go to be able to grow into this beautiful, loving man that I am today. So
Mm-hmm. And I feel that from you. And I don't see the angry boy. I only see like very positive, like from, because I read energy, I can feel energy. Energy is everything to me. And I can feel the healing parts of you, the healed parts of you. I don't know in depth like what you need to still work on, but I can feel that your heart is leading the way. I can
yeah,
feel that your purpose is now much bigger than yourself. And then I just hope so much love for you. And thank you so much for sharing your story because it's so important. And I think there's multiple layers of this is that people can, number one, see how they can overcome something challenging. So the second thing that stands out to me in this is how we should raise our children because we all strive to save them from everything, like save them, protect them. Like that's what I do with my daughter, protect her so she never has any bad experiences. It's not about not having bad experiences, it's giving the foundation that even if bad experiences happen, because we can't control life and sometimes things will happen, that they can always go back to the foundation like you have, right? Like your parents gave you foundation that became guiding post, just a guiding light in your life, right? Like you always went back to what you learned as a young child and that love that you were given. No matter all the stuff in between that happened, you were still guided in that direction because you had the foundation. And I think that's really important to remember to instill in our children is the amount of love that they get from home and also the foundation of never giving up and perseverance and what you learned in sports. That is what carried you through, even though your parents couldn't guide you anymore.
yeah, yes, no, I couldn't agree with you more. Love wins, love survives it all, and I
Always.
think that if you build that love and that that bond early on with your children, right? Like you have that foundation. And then, like you said, it's about not trying to protect them because the world is going to happen. There's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
moment in time. Like I have two children, a 3-year-old and a 14-year-old. There's going to be a moment in time that I'm not going to be there. And they're going to have to make a choice and something might happen and they might fall and hit themselves. But it's about building them up, building up their confidence, building up their self belief, their self worth, so that they know when they're able to make a choice or when they fall that they can pick themselves back up and be like, I got this. I
Mm-hmm.
got this. And that was definitely something that I my mother and my father both did an amazing job with me
Mm-hmm.
and my sister.
I agree. I love it. I love the story. I'm going to turn it into a movie. I don't know how, but
I
it's
love it.
on my vision board. Because selfishly, I want to watch that movie. Like, I love movies like that. It's so much suspense. There's so much drama. There's so much access of wealth. Like, it's fun to watch that. And I
Yeah,
want to see the happy ending because a lot of times these movies don't end with happy endings. My favorite movie back in the day is Blow, and it's not a happy ending, right?
yeah,
And then your would be probably a bigger movie even than that, but the ending is what is so meaningful, is how you can change from that tragedy, everything that happened to you, and create something beautiful. So I want to give you an
yes,
opportunity to give people your either social media handles or website, or how would you like for people to get in touch with you if
yeah.
they're moved by you or they want to work with you? How do they
Yeah,
get
yeah.
a hold of you?
You could reach me on Instagram, Richie A Acosta. So it's Richie Richie and then Acosta Acosta all together. You could go to my IG page and you'll find me there. My
Perfect.
social media for full disclosure is very dormant, very silent. I was not on social media for 20 something years. I just got on it very
Mhm.
recently. And I haven't even begun to post because I've been creating
Mhm.
content and saving it for last 6 months. What I've been doing is just creating content, but it will be coming. You will see it active within the next month or so.
Mhm.
So pretty
Perfect.
excited for that to launch.
Yes, I love that. Please get in touch with him if his story inspired you or you want to share your thoughts, or even if you want to share your story, please reach out to the podcast also at the Phoenix Podcast on Instagram. And I hope we have this conversation again once you create something amazing and beautiful, and I can bring you back. And you are creating it, but I want
Yeah.
to see the impact that it makes on people. And I just really am grateful that we met. I'm grateful you chased me down the hallway because this story is like one of the, I've told everybody in my life. I'm not even going to tell you the story until you hear the podcast because it's too good. I don't want to spoil it. So thank you for sharing with
Yeah.
me, and we'll
Thank
stay in
you.
touch.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And I'm super grateful and honored to have been on your show. And thank you so much, Marta, for this conversation, for this opportunity, allowing me to share my story here with you today.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And thank you, everybody. Please follow us on social media if you want to get more inspiration, and tune in to the next guest. I'm sure it's going to be powerful as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Phoenix Podcast. We appreciate your support. We would not be here without you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with your friends or family members who might benefit from it as well. And please don't forget to leave us a review. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.